Today on Lightning Bugs.
Within creation and creativity, there is a desire to communicate. Always think of your audience, never think for your audience. That's the credo.
Write that down, kids. I like that.
But still, where the magic can happen is when you are on your own. I think that both work. There is something about creating something out of nothing. When we talk about creativity, we're also talking about reactive creativity. Like the work that we were doing was reactive.
Yeah.
Something existed and we were building on it, but there's coral growing over this one original idea. Those sort of things are one way to create. And then there are other things where you just come up with something from nowhere.
Hi, if you're enjoying listening to Lightning Bugs, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps a lot. Hello, for most of the planet, it is Thursday. Where I am, sometimes when it's Thursday in the rest of the world, it's Friday. Such is that day. It's Friday for me. I speak to you from the future. Today we welcome the wonderful Mo Willems. He's a New York Times best-selling children's author, illustrator, animator, and playwright. From Elephant and Piggy to the Pigeon and Nuffle Bunny, some say Knuffle, I say Nuffle. His characters are loved by children and families all around. Let's check in with Mo about his newest projects and see what the driving force behind his creativity is. 1, 2.
I'm not looking at you, Ben. It's because I'm just making the salient points. So
I'm sorry that it's taken like a performative public catch-up to get in touch with you. I've been meaning to call you for, I don't know, a year?
Yeah, something like that. That's what it's coming up on.
When we were together, it was go, go, go. It was a whole lot of, like we were doing. You know, we talked, but we weren't talking about the doing. We were actually doing rather than talking about it. And that's why I kind of was interested in getting you on this podcast early, because never really got your thoughts on the doing, you know, like you do a lot of stuff. And
right.
The reason I'm doing the podcast is because I want people who have ideas and want to make things, which I think is pretty much everybody, an insight into how it works. Let's look at the trajectory of an idea, a Mo Willems idea.
Well, first of all, I think almost everything that I do is negative. It's looking for the negative space, the thing that's missing. I think a fundamental error is people who believe that ideas are things that you get,
right.
Like watches or sheep or whatnot. Ideas are things that you grow. What you do is you drop a seed in a notebook and you come back and you let it grow and you see how it goes. And sometimes they turn into invasive plants and they destroy all your other ideas. And sometimes they wither on the vine, but every now and then something grows and it's big enough and strong enough that you can cut it down and burn it for profit.
It reminds me when I was a kid, growing up on construction sites a lot, and I bring all my Hot Wheels and put them on a long plank and let them go at the same time, and then just kind of see which ones kept going down the hallway. Do you just follow multiple ideas along during your day at once and see which ones go down the hall?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately a project is a letter that you're writing to yourself. So something will stand out and say, now is the time to really focus on one project. We're ultimately athletes. And so everything that you do is a form of exercise and practicing for that next thing, right? So if an idea doesn't work out, you've learned a lot. You know, how long does it take for a baseball player to hit a baseball? Their entire lives. Every swing that they miss, it adds something to them. And every swing that they hit, they remember, oh, I'm going to do it that way. For me, I don't believe that anyone knows what is funny. I don't think that it can be defined. But if you practice enough, you can know what's not funny. You just take out the not funny, and whatever's left, you have to trust that your audience is going to agree with you, is going to find it.
It's like a scientist. It's like, I know now that this experiment has showed me that my idea was flawed, and so that's progress. But I find most people, and that includes me too, are just deathly afraid of the failure part. And that fear is pretty well death of an idea, isn't it?
I am not afraid of failing. I think I'm more afraid of not trying. I want to be as genuine in my work as possible, but if it doesn't connect, then it doesn't connect. And the other thing is I've had lots of failures. I've had the advantage of failing frequently, and in large ways. You know, I had a TV show called Sheep in the Big City. And usually when you would get your ratings, it would be a share, like you'd say a 5, and that's the percentage of people watching it. If I got a 5, that was the number of people watching the show.
Yeah, well.
And that failure on some level was liberating. You know, you could write material. There's something great about knowing that no one isn't going to see it. So you do what you want to do. But if I were to take that experience that I had and say, oh, I'm going to throw that away, I learned nothing from that, there's nothing good that came out of that, I'm going to waste that failure.
I feel like I'm more afraid of failure than you are. That's my guess. Why are you like that?
Well, I mean,
did you start out scared to death and then you realized that it wasn't going to kill you? No.
I think I have the advantage of a very limited talent. And so I have to make up for that with determination and just constantly throwing spaghetti on the wall. And I'm also willing to be fascinated. I don't know where things are going to end up, you know. And there's a certain joy to that. There's a certain joy to it. I feel like we have become so pragmatic in talking about productivity of ideas and that, you know, something needs to do something, that we've lost what creativity is for. Certainly as a human being, forgetting about like as a career, it is a chance to fill that hole. In the same way that food fills the hole where hunger is, creativity is self-expression and self-discovery. And when you don't have that, that hole gets filled with hate. This is why people who hate go after art and artists first.
I don't know if a person can actually be a person without being creative. It seems like people are creative naturally. And some people have ideas or germs of ideas that they see through to the end, either through determination or talent or deadlines or something. And then there are those who are really very frustrated. And I think some of the frustration must come from just the fear of failure, which is why I'm fascinated with your fearlessness.
Unless I am appropriately terrified, it isn't the project for me.
Really?
So when my relationship with the Kennedy Center is now 10 years old. When they first came to me, they were like, we want to license one of your books to make a play. And I'm like, that is a lost opportunity for me. I could have just said yes. And then somebody would have written and put on the play. Instead, I said, I want to write it. Yeah. I want to figure this out. And they asked me if I knew what I was doing. And I said, no, I've got no idea what I'm doing. So it's why I'm working with you. I don't have ears. I don't understand music, but what an amazing opportunity to be able to learn and create and communicate at the same time.
Do you mean that? It really scares you to do it? Or you just feel like it's sort of exciting, the possibility of the unknown, or just going off into the awesome darkness like that? Or are you actually, that does actually scare you?
Last year, when I was making these big abstractions, based on Beethoven's 9 symphonies, I had to learn about music and read about Beethoven. And I had an artist friend of mine who set me up with the paper that I should use. And I said, I may have bitten off more than I can chew. And she was very passionate to say, like, the rendering you can figure out. That's just trial and failure and trial and failure. The idea and the passion you have, it's going to be fine. it's liberating to discover all these different things, to do all these different things, to collaborate in different ways. And it always goes back to informing the work that I'm doing. I actually have an ethos, though. So I have this advantage. I strongly believe that every work of art has 3 acts. And the first act is the buy-in. You decide to listen to the podcast. You listen to the album. You buy a ticket for the concert. I have no control over the buy-in.
Right.
The second act is the thing that we make, the book, the concert, the television show. That I have control over. The third act is the most exciting. It's what that sparks. Will somebody go home and say, oh, I could do that. Let me draw that, or let me sing to that, or whatever that is. So my whole goal in everything that I do is to focus on that third act. How is what I am making going to engender somebody else to feel that they can do it? So I design all my characters so a 5-year-old can draw it, and a grown-up who isn't artistically inclined will say, oh, that's the pigeon. The victory is in seeing what other people do with those ideas. So it's liberating. I am not actually making the most important thing.
How long have you felt like that? I mean, certainly that's evolved, right? Wanting people to be inspired by what you do and even improve on it or take their direction and do their thing. That must be an evolution for you. That's not something that a little boy thinks about, is it?
Here's the thing. When I'm 5 years old, I write Charles Schultz a letter saying, can I have your job when you're dead? And I'm serious. Yeah. That's what I want to do. Charlie Brown was transformative because he wasn't happy and he was easy to draw.
Right.
I could draw Charlie Brown. He's a letter O with a letter C and 2 dots and a frown.
Right.
And so I learned from that example. I don't think I had the language then. I don't think I started to get the language until I was writing at Sesame Street, which is also very much about like Sesame Street is about you learning your letters and being able to count to 40. There's always an extra. It's not just the bit.
You feel like that was in your soul at a young age?
I think so. I was not a happy child. And Charlie Brown probably saved my life. I honestly believe a book is a child's friend. You know, a children's book is not meant to be read. It's meant to be read 1 billion times. And sometimes it's a child's only friend. And Charlie Brown and Snoopy and Linus were my friends. I want to be aware that my work matters in ways I won't know. And so I want to be honest with it.
You're one of the best collaborators I've ever worked with, maybe the best. I mean, there's something so solid and confident and productive about the process with you that is very, very rare. So
it's very sweet of you to say. I learned so much from you in terms of storytelling as well. And I think that this is really important. Like we were talking about how do you write songs, and you said, some songwriters, they feel like they got to protect the real estate, that every line is worthwhile, that every line has to be super, super specific. But if everything is important, nothing matters. So you just go blah, 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 chicken, turkey, underpants, your life.
That's right. Yeah. Secret of the Universe pops out at the most surprising time.
That's right. Well, so, I mean, that is a respect for your audience. I mean, the first thing I do when I start to make a book is I think, how big is it going to be? Because that's your first experience with a book. It is the sculpture.
What do you mean, how big?
How physically big?
Oh, how physically big. Right.
Leonardo the Terrible Monster is the biggest production book that I could get that could still be shelved at a library.
Amazing.
So when a child first sees it, they're like, oh, I can't even open this thing. This book is so big. There's going to be a lot in it. And it's about a tiny monster. And we never say the monster is tiny. We just put them in a big book.
Yeah, you get into the heads of, you've retained something of your childhood that just keeps you informed that way. I had a friend that was like that. We went to the zoo. We were in our 20s, and these guys came in to sell Kool-Aid. and literally Kool-Aid. They weren't peddling conspiracy theories. This was back when it was just really just Kool-Aid. But they came in, and the guy was dressed as a big, the big Kool-Aid man, right? Remember that guy?
Oh, you actually had wow. That was like a celebrity sighting.
Oh, totally. And he came in the back entrance, and we saw him and his people come in with their cameras and stuff, and they were going to talk to kids. And my friend Anna just pointed, because she thinks more like a child. And she pointed at him and she goes, "He's too big. He's too big." And then as soon as he got up to all the kids, they were crying because he was scary.
It's terrifying. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And none of the people who did this, who were trying to sell Kool-Aid to the children, it didn't occur to them to think like a child, like you're small and this big, hairy,
and he's also a weird amalgam of liquid and solid. I mean, that in and of itself. I mean, he's ultimately a plasma who's coming to you, selling you something terrible. When you get on stage in the first couple seconds whether it's going to work. And that's because the audience trusts you or they don't. Well, for me, for a book, that is the physical form of that sculpture.
And also you've done a lot of performing as well. So there's some, you can zoom out, I'm sure, a little bit. And even though a book is going to take a long time before the wave of feedback comes, you have some sense of liveness as well. I'd say a lot of authors or animators, artists don't have as much live experience as you do. So
I think that goes back to failing. I mean, there's nothing like being in a room with 500 people who don't think you're funny.
I get that you don't view really anything as a detour, because if there's some failure, it's informing you, like you said.
Yeah,
but literally on your trajectory in your career, do you feel like the stand-up comedy is sort of a learning detour, or do you feel like your time spent doing that is just part of the same thing?
Ultimately, for me, everything comes down to sketch. It's such a great word. I mean,
sketch.
It's a visual word, making a sketch. My drawings look like sketches. For me, a victory is if some dad goes, "Oh, I could do that." I'm like, "Good, please try," But also sketch comedy and the performance of that, and the idea of really boiling down ideas into their simplest form. Simple and easy are opposites.
Absolutely. That's important. So now let's take to the phone bank, check out the Peanut Gallery's questions. First with Brad.
Hello, this is Brad from Nashville.
Hello,
Thanks
Brad.
for taking the time. My question is, I wonder if at your level, if you ever struggle with the concept of things being too basic or pedestrian, on the flip side versus a piece of creativity matching your max potential or virtuosity. Thanks, and have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. I think that's a great question. I haven't struggled with that much. The simple answer to that is no, I'm not that concerned with that. I think that other people have been. I have all kinds of hangups, don't get me wrong, but that's not really one of them. I'm a songwriter, so let's just talk about music. A piece of music should affect you simply. The audience shouldn't have to, I don't believe, do any gymnastics to get there. They may not know why they're there, and the reasons why they are moved might be actually very complex. So I might have put a lot into it. But if you look at the outside of it, if it's 2 chords, awesome. I don't care. I kind of go for that sometimes. There was a point in my career where I was fielding a lot of that criticism, and it was during the album Songs for Silverman. And I think a lot of older fans had come to expect some complexity. Maybe were disappointed that it seemed simple. From my perspective, I'd actually put a lot more into it. The more profound something that you are trying to express is often poetic ambiguity and simplicity ends up being the way. If you over-explain something, often that's not as emotionally effective. Developing a melody, for instance, is a pretty intense thing to do. But it should come off as if it came out of the earth, it was always there. That's my opinion. And I don't give a damn if someone says that I'm being too simple ever. I take that as a compliment. I have broad shoulders, and I hope that they get the effect of the song without having to engage their brain all the time. Thanks, Brad.
People ask me advice in terms of writing books for children. The first thing I say is take an improv class.
One of the first things I think of when I think about our experience of collaborating some is I took a little improv class in 7th grade. What they sort of knew, I guess, to teach us was yes and. If you're doing an improv and one person just completely shuts off the idea, the path of the idea, that's no, and you don't do that. Yes and you would correct it and use the energy, right? That's what you do when you're collaborating that I've seen is like, even if you take it in a completely different direction, there was a yes and involved, but your way of doing it used the energy that I put into it and directed it in a way to make it valuable.
You are not there by accident. And anyone who I'm collaborating with is not there by accident. They want to be there. And you have to assume that everybody is giving their best. Point is to allow that thing to grow, to find yourself in a position where you can't remember who did what. Within creation and creativity, there is a desire to communicate. There is an understanding that there is an audience. And I say, always think of your audience, never think for your audience. That's the credo.
Write that down, kids. I like that.
But still, where the magic can happen is when you are on your own. I think that both work. There is something about creating something out of nothing. When we talk about creativity, we're also talking about reactive creativity. Like the work that we were doing was reactive. We were reacting to the original book.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Something existed and we were building on it, but there's coral growing over this one original idea.
Which was Goldilocks and the Three Dinosaurs, which was reacting to yet another older story.
That's right, exactly. Those sort of things are one way to create. And then there are other things where you just come up with something from nowhere. For me, there's sort of a healthy balance of being the introvert who's alone, who's just beating his head against the wall and throwing ideas into the idea garden and hoping for the best, and then being the person who collaborates and who's in the room. And I think that those two modalities feed off each other.
To me, art boils down to communication. At the end of the day, it just seems like that is a great way to communicate if you can do it poetically and reach between the cracks and all the kind of ambiguous specificity that's behind language, because language, the more specific you get, almost the less effective it becomes. When you can do something poetically, then that works. And to me, that's art. Do you know the pop songwriter Dan Wilson? He wrote the song "Closing Time," and he wrote a bunch of stuff for Adele. Anyway, we worked together for about 20 minutes. It's really important for him that the piano part is something that kids can play. And these are big, huge pop songs. And I took it as a little bit of a criticism of the way that I was working, that all the ideas that I was throwing out there were not playable by kids.
It's a big tent. It's a big tent. I mean, a breakthrough moment in the last couple of years when working on this Beethoven piece, and I didn't take good notes. So I don't know who said this. I don't want to take credit for this idea, but this idea it's been important to me. Beethoven is the first genius because they invent the idea of genius, and he's loving it. You know, genius means you don't have to wash your hair. You can be a jerk. Like, it's all great.
Yeah, it's worked out for me. Yeah.
Somebody said, nobody gave Beethoven extra notes. He didn't get special notes. He got the same notes everybody else got. It's just the order he put them in. And for me, that was liberating when I started painting. I'm like, nobody gets extra shapes or colors.
Right.
I get the same shapes they do.
Right.
Yeah, and my audience, they get the same shapes. Like, I don't have a monopoly on colors and shapes. I just have to figure out how to put them in a place that no one would expect them to be. Yet the second they are there, they seem like they've been there forever.
I focus in on this podcast on failure because I just find so many people in my travels who seem very creative and talented whose major issue is fear of failure. And so I find
fear
myself
of failure.
Yeah, fear of failure.
Embracing of
I know.
failure. The point is it honest? Are you having fun with it? Is it not hurting anybody? Great. Yeah. Again, there's a difference with us. We make a living with it. So maybe creativity means something or it has to be something else. But I think that people who are compelled to do it are going to do it. What we've lost is the joy of the act.
Yeah.
Right? And I talk often about this. There's a day, I believe, in America for every 9-year-old kid where they draw and they play basketball. And one day they stop drawing and they keep playing basketball. And that is because their parents still play basketball and they don't draw. And they say, oh, yeah, I'm no good at drawing or whatever. But their parents are not professional athletes. They're playing basketball for fun. Why can't we draw and doodle and create and express ourselves for fun?
One of the big embarrassments for my son, Louis, who was very good at basketball, was when I would say in front of his friends, and I just always messed up the terminology. I was saying, do I need to take you guys to basketball rehearsal? And he'd be like, it's not rehearsal, it's a practice. I'm sorry.
Well, you talked about, I thought this was really interesting. There's a room at Mass Mocha that does this, and you talked about this, the idea of music education, rather than saying, here are the notes and get them right, you just drop a bunch of instruments on the floor and let people figure out what that is. Let the kids create.
Yeah,
I know so. I'm intimidated about music because as a child, I was informed that I couldn't sing. When I was in chorus in high school, I was told, we need boys and you're tall, so open and close your mouth. But if a sound comes out of it, you're off the squad.
Right. No, that's huge. That's and I guess when it comes down to it, a lot of people's fear of creating comes down to something like that when they were growing up. Because I was scared to death of singing. For the same reason. I mean, I was told I couldn't sing. And furthermore, it was not the manliest thing in the world to do. And the most important thing to be in North Carolina in the 70s growing up was a manly man. So it was kind of knocked out of me for a long time. Eventually, the only way for me to hear my songs was to do it myself because other people weren't doing it the way that I wanted to hear it. So I would play, I'd say through, even after the release of our first record, I was on the verge of being ill to be on stage singing. I was just had talked myself into it. And now I don't care anymore. It took 25 years.
I'll tell you personally, what's been a liberation for me is I did a series of books called the Elephant and Piggy books, and they've spent 10 years making them. And I chose to finish that project, partially because it was a liberation. My obit is written. I don't have to worry about what people are going to talk about the work that I've made. That is the work. Now I just get to have fun.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a good way to look at it.
I get to work with Ben Folds. I get to write operas.
And you get to work with Beethoven. I want to talk about that a little bit because, I think everyone would understand neither one of us are musicologists or experts on Beethoven, but you don't have to be moved or to react to the music. To me, there's a real interesting relationship in Beethoven's music to simplicity and difficulty, like you were saying, because while it is complex, almost all his ideas, at least the ones that I love, which are so many of them, sound like they just came up from the ground. They don't sound like they were written.
The goal of any good drawing is that the ink looks wet. When you turn the page, it's like, oh, that drawing just happened right before I turned the page. It looks so fresh.
So there is a sense of time in it for you.
Well, that's what you're trying to capture, that magic. And what I think happens with Beethoven, you obviously have better ears than I, is it feels like the ink is wet musically.
Interesting. Yeah.
That the note, like you can talk about these complex ideas that are moving, and then there's this direction, and then he's taking that quote and he's playing with it later or whatnot. But it feels to me like the notes are just rolling out wet.
Would you say then that Beethoven's music, like I think a lot of great music, has the quality of seeming to make a discovery at the same time as the audience is making the discovery.
I actually think sometimes the best work is when the audience gets there first, when they manipulate you into feeling what you need to feel, and then that wave pushes behind you, and you're like, I knew that was coming. The idea that here was a deaf guy who was writing music that he knew could not be performed in his lifetime.
Yeah.
He knew that the symphony on the premiere would not be able to get it.
Yeah.
But he's like, one day there'll be professional musicians and they'll be able to make that.
Yeah.
But I would say that magic, that is something that is mattering more and more to me. I am becoming, and this is why COVID has been hard performatively. We had the band, which is what you call a symphony orchestra. I think that's really cool. The band played our piece in rehearsal. And beforehand you said like, oh yeah, this is going to be really great, Mo. And I'm like, I've had stuff composed for me and whatnot. But he's like, no. This is it. They're live. They're doing it. And that coordination and that music just pouring over me, it was transformative.
But it really made a big difference to you to have human beings in the room. And that's helpful for me because otherwise I might have been more concentrating on what didn't happen that I wanted to happen.
We had however many musicians and however many comedians all performing for one purpose. Everybody was working for the same purpose, to create this moment, these 20 minutes. Yet at the same time, everyone was fully being themselves. That's all I could ever hope for in the world, is that a bunch of people would care enough about something that they would work in tandem and yet remain to be individuals. And the idea that could happen for 20 minutes is a miracle.
Well, that's why when I advocate for the symphony orchestra, I always call it the highest symbol of civilization. It's a symbol of civilization. You're seeing people working together for something bigger, and yet inside it, they're all making still individual decisions. No one has all the say. No one gets everything they want, but they get something at the end that we are surprised by that is better than all the little individuals. I mean, it is civilization. The thing that carried me through the music and the reason that I wanted to do the piece was a line that I won't get exactly right. You'll have to do it for me. But at the end, when Goldilocks says, if you find yourself in the wrong story, leave. Is that the line?
Yeah, if you ever find yourself in the wrong story, leave. This was a letter that I wrote to myself, and ultimately it's about my childhood and not being in a place where things are made to my size and not being in a place that's ultimately safe, and there being ulterior things happening without me realizing it. So I don't necessarily know when I understood what I was writing. When it came to me, I was appreciative of the letter that I had sent myself.
Yeah. Well, I was appreciative of it too. I think it's really powerful. It powers the whole story. So,
yeah,
the idea that, I've written songs where the thing that people are the most attracted to was not an afterthought, but was it close to the end. Was that the case with this? It's close to the end of the story. You get through the whole thing, you're like, oh, that's funny. Oh, she's out. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, that's what she said. It's amazing.
Yeah, and funnily enough, it's not unlike what you're talking. I'm writing a song. I think what we do, the similarities are, you don't write a song to be heard once either, do you?
No.
It's got to live forever and be heard. And people, even if they know what's coming, they still that moment has to be special for them. So the silliness of the beginning of the book does lull you into a place where the heart of it and the seriousness of it should surprise and therefore be more powerful. So I put out a sketchbook every year for clients and friends, and the original Pigeon book was a sketchbook, and Goldilocks and the Three Dinosaurs was one, but it was very, very different. It was just pure joke, kind of Godzilla meets Bambi kind of a thing.
Another one of those.
I was encouraged to think about it as a book, and whenever anybody says that encourages me to do anything, I refuse for like 5 years.
I've got that disease too.
I think you know that one. I think really looking at it, Childhood is always a difficult time because the furniture is not built to your size. And so the joke of the scale of dinosaurs then became a question of like, what is your story? I think the end papers is what did it. The beginning of the end papers, it's just all the possible Goldilocks and the three major networks, Goldilocks and the three wise men, Goldilocks and the blah, 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 the three Subway sandwiches. Realizing that there are potentialities for stories. It's the size of the book. A wide book is about places, because when you take a picture of a place, you go wide. So Where the Wild Things Are is a wide book, right? And a tall book is about characters. Lily's Purple Plastic Purse or
portrait,
something like that.
Yeah, because it's
right.
portrait angle.
It's your portrait.
This was the landscape, yeah.
And so when I first started doing covers of this, I had done another book about dinosaurs, Edwina. The dinosaur didn't know she existed. And I thought that was going to be a tall book, and it was a wide book because it wasn't about a dinosaur. It was about how a community reacts to a dinosaur. So when I started to sketch this book, I started wide, and I realized, no, this is really about Goldilocks. This is not about the dinosaurs in the house. This is about Goldilocks. And the book got tall.
Hey, one of the things I do with my guests is have them give our audience an exercise. I'm calling a new week's resolution. This week, we're all going to read poetry 1 minute a day, or we're going to take a walk in the woods, or we're going to write a song even if we don't play music.
This week, we are all going to take the letters of our first name.
Okay.
And we are going to use those shapes to create characters.
Oh.
And we are going to create a world in which these characters live together.
Wow. Okay. So we got to go wide with this a little bit too. We can't just start with I'm just thinking. Well,
so you have I've got the advantage that, it's a duo. Your characters are going to be a trio.
So the first.
So there's a B character that has the shape of the letter B in it somehow in its design,
and only the B, or I go with the all the letters and like.
Well,
B,
the E
my
is
initials.
the second character.
Okay.
How does the B, the E, and the N?
Okay.
There are three different characters, all of which incorporate their shape in their design. They could be talking dogs. They could be bowls of frozen peas. They could be left fingers.
I'm doing all these too. I started with the B because I figured I could see, but I can add to the B, right?
Absolutely. Right. The B could be a design in the shirt, or the B could be the lips or the nose, or again, it could be a robot.
Right. Oh, okay. All right. Now I'm starting to see it. Okay.
Right. Or they could be. You could put little dots in between the bumps of the bees, and there's eyes. And if you put it sideways, because remember, you can draw it anyway. That bee can turn into like a frog's head.
Man, I'm getting nothing yet. I'm going to work on that. Yeah. My first one was C, but
that's sort of
I don't know what it is yet.
A bellyfish.
It's a bellyfish. Okay, cool. Yeah. So everyone's going to make characters out of the first letters of their names, and
out of all the letters of their first name.
Okay, all the letters of the first name. So for me, it's B-E-N. I won't go with the jammin' part too.
Right. Exactly. You can keep it short. And a matter of fact, I'll make one as well, and I will send it to you.
And so I'll put that up. And then if everyone wants to tweet or Instagram their version of it, then I'll keep an eye out and I'll put it back out. I'm interested in see what people do.
There is no such thing as a wrong drawing.
How many projects or ideas do you think, just wild guess, multiple, are you thinking or working on, just even if you pay a little attention to one? Like if you're working on,
I have 23 things in production right now.
That then you know that. That's a real number.
I have a flow chart. Yeah.
Okay, but you're not joking.
No.
Okay, good. No, that's good. I love that because I mean, I definitely know.
I mean, I may be 33, and I'm trying to make the numbers down because I'm embarrassed. But
No, I think that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
No, I think that's fantastic because some people would pretend not to know that. I mean, someone like Elton John can tell you at any given on any given day how many gigs he's played over the last year, how many songs he's written over this time. He loves the numbers of it. That actually is entertaining, helpful, and inspiring to him. And I've always been interested in that. If someone would know that. So, okay, you're working on 23 things. Do you think that during your day today or tomorrow, you will consider each one of them just for a minute and move on to the next? Or do you concentrate on one?
I break everything down. So there are creative days and reactive days. It's so much easier to be reactive. Yes, no, fix it. Let's go do this. Hey, I'm going to talk about myself.
Right. Today's a reactive
So that's
day.
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Really?
I react on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I am creative on the other 3 days up until about 3:30 in the afternoon, and then I allow myself to be reactive again.
I love this. Okay, what about the weekend?
I work on the other things.
Whether it's a reactive working or
no, I love it when the phone doesn't ring. What happened is I date stamp all my art, and I had a retrospective, and we were going through all these drawings, and they were all date stamped like January 1st, December 25th, because that's when the phone wasn't ringing. My wife, we moved to Paris for a year, and she said that I could not do anything that I would profit by for a year. And I negotiated that down to 6 months. And I had to keep the empire running. So once a week, I just did phone calls all day. And the rest, I walked around and I made drawings and I thought about who I wanted to be. And I ended up with a whole bunch of books and projects and things like that.
But you profited on those things. So are you in trouble?
I'm in trouble. I'm a little bit busted. But we came back. That's what we started. So it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, reactive. And a reaction is addictive. I mean, it's,
yes.
You feel, I accomplished something.
It's like jumping on the exercise bike. It's already like, yeah. I'm down with some reactive time. I hate the other part. The other part
is really hard. And so if you force yourself to do it, then you can, even if at the end of the day you don't have anything, you still do. You are marinating.
So what you're really doing is you're saying on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I'm going to make literally office hours, and I'm going to just sit and squeeze out ideas.
I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to draw some abstractions. I'll have a swim. If I'm in production, I will be in production. If I have drawings that I have to do, I'll do that. That's part of it. But I'm going to let my mind wander. I'm going to allow myself a fortuitous boredom.
I just don't even know how you could even pull that off. I could never do that. I mean, what if on Monday is the only day that you and I can get together and work on our reactive thing? I mean,
There's no such thing as a cartoon emergency.
There's probably no such thing as an art emergency in general, is there?
Look, if I'm on the road or something, I'm not a monk in that sense. But to have that rhythm and to be able to wake up and say, I'm not going to take the easy way out and say, what's going on with Project 427?
Okay.
You guys need to get going on the blah, blah, blah. I'm going to not be looking at my computer. I'm going to be looking at the paper on my desk and start to have a dialogue with the medium. But, again, if at the end of the day, I haven't made a drawing that I like, then I've still learned something. That's it's not useless.
What do you do with all the extra paper when you draw something that's just not going anywhere?
I cut it into strips, and my wife uses it for her lists. I have had many careers, so I've stopped things. Right. I stopped doing TV, which I'm now dipping my toes back into. I stopped it, and I was lucky enough that for books to come along, and I made a commitment to myself that I was going to enjoy books, because the mistake that I made when I worked in TV was I was too worried about making it and not taking pleasure in it. I just read this thing where Carl Reiner and Steve Martin used to drive to work together when they were making The Jerk. And Carl Reiner apparently every morning would say, "We get to make a movie."
Amazing. Yeah.
right? And at that point, he's in his 60s.
Well, I think that is some of it is the perspective. Perhaps he wasn't saying that when he was scared
Right,
for his
32,
creative life
right,
and
yeah.
32 and
Yeah.
trying to go for it. I mean, I've said every time I've walked off a stage or been on stage with an orchestra, I just pinch myself. I can't believe this many people are here to do this. This might never happen again. Like, this is insane. But I didn't have that perspective. When I was younger. So I think that may take a while.
That may be age. Yeah. That may be
When you left television, were you leaving television and you already had your hand reaching towards the rope of books? Was it already an option, or were you just going into the abyss like, I quit and I don't know what's next? Did you know the books were next?
A little bit. I had a tough year where a lot of things didn't work out, but my best buddy hired me to be a writer on his show. And I ultimately did leave when I felt the books were going to be enough that I could take care of my
books
wife
were
and my
knocking at
kid.
the door and it was time. It wasn't like just, you might. I mean,
but it was a 6 or 7 year project just to get the books going. And so even in the sort of the height of me working on TV shows, I was realizing, like, in TV, particularly at the time, we couldn't talk about failure. It was too expensive. But a book is not expensive to make. So all the things that the head writers were telling me, like, that's a great idea, but we can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, but you can do it in books.
Right. That afforded you the freedom to not have someone telling you what wouldn't work, but.
Well, there were still publishers who told me what wouldn't work, but they were more like, well, whatever. You know, it
won't work, but whatever. Take it away.
It's fine.
Be my guest.
You know, I mean, basically, we're like, we're gonna go to Kinko's, we'll put some cardboard on it, we'll see how it goes.
What seems to me about TV though is that it all has to happen so fast, right? I mean, isn't it fast paced? I mean, you just move from one thing to the next.
Yeah, I mean, I think some things, once you get into production, you know, you're writing 11 minutes a week. If you do that for 52 weeks in a year, but then you get a lot of your bad writing out of it. You know, the great thing about starting at Sesame Street rather than at books is you're anonymous, right? Like, a kid is not going to say, boy, Mo Willems didn't write a great script today. The kid is going to say, Elmo wasn't as funny as he should have been. Maybe he, has a fever.
I always thought it'd be fun to write on Saturday Night Live as a comedy writer. That seems like an amazing burnout life to try for like 4 or 5 years.
I think for 4 or 5 hours, it seems like, there's a lot of pressure for that. I mean, that was a great advantage of starting at Sesame. Unlike some of the other shows that I was at, there was really you could take your time on your scripts, but you couldn't rewrite. Like, I mean, writing plays is so much more fun because they're the actors and you rewrite and you really, you get to dig in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, having the time is exciting.
Another ethic about songwriting is that it's always better. This is, I think, a myth. It's always better if you do it fast. And I understand that because you're still inspired by it and you have certain perspective to make decisions that make sense. But I've never done it that way. Mine have always I toss a couple things on it. It sits sometimes for 5-10 years. I might come back to it later and then realize the song later.
I learned this when my first book came out. They send you reviews of the good reviews. They don't send you the bad reviews. And the first 2 reviews for Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus were positive. One said, I love this book because it teaches kids the value of no and when to stop and give up. And the next said, I love this book because it teaches kids to never give up and always strive and to fulfill their dream.
That's amazing. Reminds me of,
and they're both right.
They're both right. Well, there was, I don't know who the author was, but someone I heard on NPR years ago said he had gotten 2 letters. That's all he got one day over a book he wrote, and they were, from fans of the book or something. And one said, "This is the most amazing thing I've ever read. It's a revelation." The next one said, "This is such dross, the worst thing ever." And he said it was easy to respond to them. He wrote, "You may be right," to both. Same answer.
Never fall in love with a good review. I did see one when I would actually look at things online. Someone said, this, I forget what it was. Maybe it was a Pigeon book. I said, this book is genius. It's just incredible. Mo's mind can reach out and create things that nobody else can. There is a talking animal in this book. And we all know full well that animals cannot talk. But that doesn't stop him. He created a talking animal.
And I'm going to make a song. We've already done this some because, some of the songs that I was coming up with out of Goldilocks were coming from the character, like when Goldilocks was going, "Anam,
Yeah.
and then that was simple to me. It's like, I hear the orchestra doing this now. I get it. But I'm going to do that with you. But if you want to just put something on your phone, video or not, and I can send you some examples, but basically, if you just want to say a sentence, that's enough.
All right. So if I want to hum, if I want to come up with a word or a phrase that interests me.
Yeah, even what you're doing now is interesting to me. With the phrase, because you've already got cadence, you've got a theme, you've got inflection and pitch. So yeah, right, you got it.
So this is terrifying because I am a little afraid of what you will make of what I say. And I see your wheels spinning. I mean, I can hear your wheels spinning, which is exciting. So let me do it now. Let me give you a phrase that means something to me, which is you always think of so I always think of my audience. I never think for my audience.
There you go. That's it. I love it. All right, man. Well, we'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks for everything.
All
we'll
right.
catch up.
All right. Take care, man.
Take care.
Peace.
I'll see you. Bye. All right. So if I want to hum, if I want to come up with a word or a phrase that interests me, and I see your wheels spinning. I mean, I can hear your wheels spinning, which is exciting. So let me do it now. Let me give you a phrase that means something. I always think of my audience. I never think for my audience. I always think of my audience. I never think for my audience. I always think. I never think.
I always think of my audience. I never think for my audience.
I always think.
I always think of my audience. I
never think
for my
audience. And I see your wheels spinning. I can hear your wheels spinning, which is exciting. And I see your wheels, hear your wheels, see your wheels, hear your wheels spinning. I always think of my audience. I never think for my audience. I never think for my audience. I always think of my audience. I never think for my audience.
Hi, if you're enjoying listening to Lightning Bugs, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps a lot.